I never thought summer camp at 23 would change my life. But here I am, lying in the top bunk at 2 a.m, unable to sleep because the guy below me just said something that's made my heart feel like it's trying to break through my ribs. Reed. His name is Reed, and 3 weeks ago he was just another counsellor I'd have to share a cabin with for 8 weeks. Now he's the reason I can't think straight, can't sleep, can't imagine what August is going to feel like when we both go back to our separate lives. Let me back up. I'm Dylan, and I'd signed up to be a counsellor at Camp Pinewood because I needed the money. And honestly, I needed to escape my life for a while. I'd just finished grad school, had no job prospects, was living in my parents' basement, and my ex-girlfriend had gotten engaged to someone she'd met like 3 months after we broke up. So yeah, 2 months in the woods teaching kids how to kayak and build fires seemed like exactly the kind of reset I needed. I got to camp on a Sunday in June, dragging my duffel bag up the steps of Cabin 7, which was going to be home for the summer. The counsellor cabins were small, just 2 bunk beds and a bathroom we'd share with whoever got assigned as our bunkmates. I'd requested a single room in my application, but apparently everyone requests that, and I got an email 2 weeks before saying I'd be sharing with another counsellor. I was unpacking when I heard footsteps on the wooden porch, and then the screen door creaked open. I turned around and there he was, tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and these eyes that were such a light brown they looked almost amber in the sunlight streaming through the window. He was wearing a faded camp t-shirt from a few years ago and shorts, and he had this easy smile that made me immediately relax about the whole sharing a cabin situation. "Hey," he said, dropping his backpack on the floor. "I'm Reed. Looks like we're bunkmates." "Dylan," I said, and we shook hands. His grip was firm and warm, and I noticed he had calluses on his palms. "You been here before?" "The shirt." He glanced down and laughed. "Oh yeah, this is my 4th summer. I keep telling myself I'll get a real job, but then May rolls around and I'm filling out the application again. There's something about this place." We talked while we unpacked, falling into conversation easily. He told me he was between things, had graduated college 2 years ago with a degree in environmental science, but was still figuring out what he wanted to do with it. He'd been working at a climbing gym during the year, teaching kids and adults how to belay and navigate routes. I told him about grad school, about studying literature, and having no idea what to do with that degree either. "So we're both professional camp counsellors avoiding real life," he said, grinning as he tossed a pillow onto the bottom bunk. "Looks that way," I agreed. "You want bottom or top?" "I'll take bottom," he said. "I'm a restless sleeper. You don't want me up there rolling around all night." That first week was orientation and training. We learned the camp schedule, the safety protocols, where all the medical supplies were kept, how to handle homesick campers in emergency situations. Reed and I fell into an easy rhythm. We'd wake up together, walk to the dining hall for breakfast with the other counsellors, spend our days in training sessions, and then collapse back in our cabin at night, talking in the dark until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. I learned things about him in fragments. He had a younger sister he was really close with. He'd grown up in Vermont. He loved terrible action movies and could quote every line from Point Break. He made really good coffee in this little French press he'd brought. He hummed when he was concentrating. He had a scar on his left shoulder from a climbing accident. He was thoughtful and funny and kind, and I found myself looking forward to the end of each day when we'd be back in the cabin, just the 2 of us. The campers arrived on a Saturday, and suddenly our quiet routine exploded into chaos. We were assigned to different groups. I had the 12-year-olds, teaching them kayaking and swimming. Reed had the 14-year-olds, leading them on hikes and rock climbing expeditions. Our days became a blur of activities, meals, campfires, and making sure nobody got hurt or too homesick. But the nights, those were still ours. We'd stumble back to Cabin 7 after evening activities, exhausted and smelling like campfire smoke, and we'd shower and change and then just talk. About our days, about the funny things kids said, about our lives before camp. Reed told me about a bad breakup he'd gone through the previous fall, how his girlfriend of 2 years had sat him down one day and told him she didn't think he'd ever really been in love with her, not the way she needed. "The worst part was," he said one night, his voice floating up from the bottom bunk, "she was probably right. I cared about her, I really did, but something was always missing. I kept thinking it would click into place eventually, you know, like I was waiting for some feeling that never came." I understood that more than I wanted to admit. I'd felt the same way with Sarah, my ex, like I was going through the motions of a relationship, hitting all the right notes, but never feeling that overwhelming thing everyone talked about. That can't eat, can't sleep, reach for the stars kind of feeling. Yeah, I said quietly. I know exactly what you mean. There was a long pause, and then Reed said, You ever wonder if maybe you're just not capable of that? Like maybe some people just don't feel things as intensely? I used to think that, I admitted, but I don't know. I think maybe we just hadn't met the right person yet. Maybe, Reed said, and something in his voice made my chest feel tight. It was in the third week that things started to shift. We had a day off, a Tuesday when the campers went on an overnight trip with other counsellors, and Reed asked if I wanted to hike up to Eagle Point, this lookout spot about 3 miles into the woods. I said yes immediately. We packed sandwiches and water bottles and set out after breakfast. The hike was beautiful, all dappled sunlight through pine trees and the sound of birds and our footsteps on the trail. Reed was in his element, pointing out different plants and trees, telling me their names and facts about them. He was so animated, so alive, and I found myself watching him more than the scenery. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved. The way he used his hands when he explained things. The way he'd look back at me every few minutes to make sure I was keeping up, and his whole face would soften when our eyes met. We reached Eagle Point around noon and sat on the flat rocks overlooking the valley. The view was incredible. Miles of green forest stretching out below us, mountains in the distance. We ate our sandwiches in comfortable silence, and then Reed lay back on the warm stone, hands behind his head, eyes closed against the sun. This is my favourite place in the world, he said. I come up here every summer. It's like no matter what's going wrong in my life, I can come here and remember that I'm just this tiny thing in this huge, beautiful world, and somehow that makes everything feel more manageable. I lay back next to him, close enough that our shoulders were almost touching. I get that, I said. It's like perspective. Exactly. He turned his head to look at me, and we were so close I could see the different shades of brown and gold in his eyes. I'm really glad you're here this summer, Dylan. Like, really glad. I wasn't sure about having a bunkmate, but you're easy to be around. Easy to talk to. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. Same, I managed. You're the best part of this summer so far. Something flickered across his face, an expression I couldn't quite read, and then he smiled and looked back up at the sky. We stayed there for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, and when we finally hiked back down, something had changed between us. A new awareness, a charge in the air that hadn't been there before. I started noticing things I'd been trying not to notice. The way my pulse would quicken when Reed walked into a room. The way I'd find excuses to sit next to him at meals, to partner with him during camp activities. The way I'd catch myself staring at him when he wasn't looking, memorizing the line of his jaw, the curve of his mouth, the way his t-shirts fit across his shoulders. And I started noticing the way he looked at me too, longer than necessary, with an intensity that made my skin feel warm, the way he'd find reasons to touch me casually, a hand on my shoulder, a playful shove, fingers brushing mine when we passed things to each other, the way he'd laugh at things I said that weren't even that funny, like he was just happy to hear me talk. I'd never felt this way about a guy before. I mean, I'd noticed attractive men, had fleeting thoughts I'd immediately dismissed. But this was different. This was consuming. This was lying awake at night listening to Reed breathe in the bunk below me and wanting nothing more than to climb down and curl up next to him. This was watching him demonstrate a climbing technique to his campers and feeling something twist in my stomach that was definitely not platonic. This was realizing, with a mixture of terror and exhilaration, that I was falling for him. I didn't know what to do with this realization. I'd spent 23 years assuming I was straight, building my identity around that assumption, and now suddenly I was lying in bed at night thinking about what it would be like to kiss Reed, to touch him, to tell him how I felt. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive I'd ever felt. We were halfway through the summer when things came to a head. It was a Friday night, and we'd just finished the weekly camp dance. The kids were all tucked into their cabins, the other counsellors were hanging out by the fire pit, and Reed and I had escaped back to cabin 7, claiming exhaustion. We'd both showered and changed, and Reed had made us coffee even though it was almost 11 at night. We were sitting on his bunk because mine was too close to the ceiling, both of us leaning against the wall, shoulders pressed together, mugs warm in our hands. Reed was telling me about one of his campers who'd finally made it to the top of the climbing wall after trying all week, and I was watching his face as he talked, the way his whole expression lit up with pride, Dylan, he said suddenly, turning to look at me, can I ask you something? Sure, I said, my heart suddenly pounding. He hesitated, looking down at his coffee. Have you ever had feelings for someone and been completely terrified to say anything because you didn't want to ruin what you already had? I couldn't breathe. Yeah, I whispered. Yeah, I have. He looked up at me, and the expression in his eyes made my chest ache. What did you do? I'm still figuring that out, I said honestly. We sat there in silence, the air between us crackling with everything we weren't saying. Reed's hand was resting on the bed between us, and I watched as he slowly moved it closer to mine, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. Our fingers touched, and then he was lacing his fingers through mine, and I felt like every nerve in my body was firing at once. Dylan, he said quietly, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. I need to tell you something, and if I'm reading this wrong, just say so, and we can pretend this never happened, okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, he said, the words coming out in a rush. Like, at all. Every day. All day. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I fall asleep. When I'm with my campers, I'm counting down the hours until I can see you again. When we're apart, I'm looking for you. When we're together, I don't want it to end. And I know this is probably crazy and terrible timing, and maybe you don't feel the same way, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel this. I was staring at him, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. Reed, I managed. I feel the same way. I've been losing my mind over here feeling the same way. His eyes widened. Really? Really? I didn't know I could feel this way about a guy. But Reed, I think about you constantly. I'm pretty sure I'm falling in love with you, and it's terrifying and amazing, and I don't know what to do with it. For a moment, we just stared at each other, both of us breathing hard, and then Reed set his coffee mug on the floor and took mine from my hands and set it down too. He turned back to me, reaching up to cut my face with his hand, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone. Can I kiss you? He whispered. Please, I breathed. And then his lips were on mine and the whole world narrowed down to that single point of contact. His mouth was soft and warm and tasted like coffee, and when I kissed him back I heard him make this small sound in the back of his throat that made heat pool in my stomach. My hands found their way to his hair, his arms wrapped around my waist, and we kissed like we were trying to make up for all the weeks of wanting and not having. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. Reed pressed his forehead against mine, his hands still on my waist, holding me close. I've wanted to do that for so long, he murmured. Me too, I said. God, me too. We spent the rest of the night on his bunk, kissing and talking and kissing some more. He told me he'd known he was bisexual since high school, that he'd dated both guys and girls but had never felt about anyone the way he felt about me. I told him this was all new to me, but it felt right in a way nothing else ever had. We talked about what this meant, what we were doing, and decided we didn't need to label it right now. We just needed to be together and figure the rest out as we went. The next few weeks were the happiest of my life. We kept things quiet around camp, not because we were ashamed, but because we wanted this to be ours, something private and precious that belonged just to us. But in our cabin at night, we were inseparable. We'd push the bunks together and fall asleep tangled up in each other, whispering secrets in the dark. We'd steal kisses when no one was looking, find excuses to sneak away for a few minutes alone. Everything felt heightened and intense and perfect. But as July turned into August, reality started creeping in. We only had 2 weeks left at camp, and neither of us wanted to talk about what happened after. I was supposed to go back to my parents' house in Ohio. Reed lived in Colorado. We'd be halfway across the country from each other, back to our real lives, our real problems. It was our last night at camp, and we were lying in bed, my head on Reed's chest, his fingers running through my hair. The cabin was packed up around us, our bags by the door, ready for the morning when we'd both leave. I don't want to go, I said quietly. I know, Reed said, his voice rough. Me neither. We lay there in silence for a while, and then Reed said, Dylan, I need to tell you something. I lifted my head to look at him. His eyes were serious, almost scared. I can't picture going home without you, he said, like I've been trying to imagine it, what it's going to be like to wake up and not have you there, to go through my day without seeing you, and I just can't. I don't want to. This summer, being with you. It's been the realest thing I've ever felt. And I know we live far apart and we have to figure out our lives, and it's complicated, but Dylan, I'm in love with you. Really, truly in love with you. And I don't want this to end just because camp is ending. I felt tears prick at my eyes. I'm in love with you too, I said. So much it scares me. I've never felt anything like this. So let's not let it end, Reed said, sitting up and pulling me with him. Let's figure it out. Long distance at first, yeah, but we'll visit each other, we'll video chat. We'll make it work until we can figure out a way to be in the same place. I'll move to Ohio, you can move to Colorado. We'll both move somewhere else entirely. I don't care, as long as I get to be with you. You really mean that? I asked. I've never meant anything more in my life, he said. He took my face in his hands, looking at me with such intensity it made my breath catch. I love you, Dylan. I want to build a life with you. Not someday, not eventually. I want to start now, today, tomorrow. I want every day with you. I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt into it, all the love and hope and fear and joy. When we pulled apart, I was crying and smiling at the same time. Okay, I said, and let's do it. Let's figure it out together. We stayed up all night talking, making plans. Reed had a friend in Denver who was looking for a roommate. I could move there, look for work, figure out what I wanted to do with my degree, or he could come to Ohio for a while, give that a try. We decided we'd start with me moving to Colorado. It felt right, like a fresh start for both of us. We left camp the next morning hand in hand, loading our bags into Reed's car. We'd decided to drive back together, take our time, spend a few more days just being together before real life kicked in. As we pulled away from Camp Pinewood, I looked back at Cabin 7, at the place where everything had changed, and I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. 3 months ago, I'd been lost and directionless, running away from my life. Now I was driving toward a future I couldn't wait to start, with the person I loved sitting next to me, our fingers intertwined on the center console. That was 6 months ago. I'm writing this from our apartment in Denver, the one we moved into together in September. Reed is in the kitchen making dinner, humming like he always does, and in a minute I'll close my laptop and go wrap my arms around him from behind and kiss the back of his neck just because I can. Just because he's here and this is real and we made it work. It hasn't been easy. Long distance those first few weeks was brutal. My parents didn't understand at first why I was moving across the country, and telling them about Reed, about us, was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. But they came around, especially when they met him at Thanksgiving and saw how happy I was. Reed's family was more understanding, his sister especially, who told me she'd never seen her brother smile so much. I found a job at a bookstore, and I'm starting to think about maybe teaching, maybe getting my teaching certificate. Reed is working at the climbing gym again, but he's also taking classes in outdoor education, thinking about starting his own guide service. We're figuring it out together, building this life one day at a time. Sometimes I think about that night in Cabin 7 when Reed told me he couldn't picture going home without me, and I'm so grateful he had the courage to say it. Because he was right. We belonged together, and everything else was just details we'd work out. I never expected summer camp to change my life. I never expected to fall in love with my bunkmate, to discover this whole part of myself I didn't know existed. But here I am, happier than I've ever been, in love with someone who sees me and knows me and chooses me every single day. They say home is where the heart is, and I used to think that was just a cliché. But now I understand. Home isn't a place. It's Reed's laugh in the kitchen, his hand in mine, the way he looks at me like I'm his whole world. Home is the life we're building together, one moment at a time, and I wouldn't change a single thing.